Hey, what's going on, everyone? Kyle Onstott here with Inside the Empire podcast. I'm here with my friend Ed Bush with Memorial Funeral Services. How you doing, Ed?
Doing very well. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. I just want to get started and learn a little bit about you and your history, your upbringing, your story, both business and personal.
Okay.
How take a look inside your empire and how you've built it, and then also take a look inside your mental empire and uncover some tools that you've been able to utilize in your life.
I'll try not to scare you with that.
All right. Sounds good. So tell me, I want to start with your backstory. Tell me a little bit about where were you born, raised? What was your upbringing like? What did that look like?
A little bit varied, some things. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. I lived there 6 weeks. Mom and Dad decided to move to Pontiac, Michigan. So we moved to Michigan and lived there for a year. Moved back to Birmingham so my brother could be born in Alabama. Don't ask me why.
Yeah.
My dad never gave me a real answer to that. So my little brother's born in Birmingham 18 months after I came along. After he's born, we go back to Michigan. And I grew up basically in Pontiac, Michigan. My dad became a pastor. He went to a little private preaching school that hosted at the church where we were attending. He ended up taking a church in North Alabama. So I went to high school, I think a year of middle school in Alabama, and went to college from there. Met my wife-to-be, and we got married in college, and the rest is history. 43 years and a half later, we're still here.
Dang. So you got married in college?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So after my sophomore year, we got married.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a trip.
That's impressive.
Yeah, we got married young. I was only 19, she was 20, got married. And she was a year ahead of me in school, so she graduated, and then she had a full-time gig, and I went to school full-time, finished up.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Nowadays, people would be called crazy if they got married at 19, 20.
I would not recommend it.
Yeah.
It worked great for us. And a generation or two ago, a lot of people got married when they were a lot younger.
Mm-hmm.
But the world was different a generation or two ago than it is today.
That's a fact.
People are different, and it changes with time. But, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I have two sons. My wife and I have two boys. My oldest will be 40 in December. My youngest is 38. Neither of them married until they were in their mid-30s.
Wow.
So I don't know if they saw us and like, we're never going to do that, or if they're like, nah, we don't want to do that just because, So. But anyway, they got great spouses and kids, and all is good.
That's awesome. So you went to college. What'd you go to college for? What did you study?
I started out as a music major.
Okay.
My intention all through high school, I was engrossed in music, played all kinds of different instruments. Can't play anything but a radio today, and don't do that often. I usually use Spotify.
Yeah.
But I was big into music, really wanted to do it, and it was really funny. I had a full scholarship to Western Kentucky University in Lexington, Kentucky, full ride musician scholarship. And about probably 3 weeks before I was supposed to go to college as a freshman, a God thing happened in my life. I got in this interesting conversation with my dad one night after coming in late from a date. He didn't appreciate me coming in late, and I thought I was old enough to do what I wanted to do, and he helped me understand quickly that if you live in his house, you live by his rules. You know that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had a long conversation. Before the night was over, I finally decided, if I go to Lexington, I'll probably bust hell wide open when I die, because there's nothing very good in the music industry back in that time. This is in the 70s. It's all long-haired, hardcore rock and roll, and there was not a good place for a Christian musician to be at that time.
Right.
So I knew my road was probably going to be pretty bumpy. So I ended up going down to Montgomery, Alabama. There was a little Christian school. It was called Alabama Christian at the time. It's now Faulkner University. Great school. But I went there to play baseball and just go to college. And decided when I got there, started out as a business major because I knew I didn't want to do music anymore.
Yeah.
Went into my first business class, and the professor said if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't study business. I got up and walked out. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, why would I want to take a class from you if you don't even want to be in business?
Yeah.
And he looked at me kind of with a puzzling look on his face, and I'm like, I just left the room, changed. And so I don't even know when I decided, but I decided to study religion. And so I ended up with a bachelor's in theology, and got out of school. My wife and I, we actually graduated from a four-year university in Searcy, Arkansas. It's called Harding University, not to be confused with Harvard University.
Yeah.
Slight spelling difference in pronunciation. But anyway, we
Maybe
ended
a
up
better school than Harvard. Who knows?
Yeah, it could be. they're at least accredited. Harvard's never been accredited, just FYI.
Just saying. Just throwing that out there.
Just throwing out there. It's a fact. They've never been accredited because they didn't have to be. But anyway, we went back to Montgomery. And I became an admissions rep with that little college where we had been. It transitioned into a 4-year school by that time. And we were worshiping with a little church called Highland Church. And the guy that was the minister at that church, he and I became good buddies. I actually used to do a live radio broadcast with him on Sunday nights.
Oh, wow.
Live call in, ask any Bible-related question, and we'd try to make up an answer for it.
So cool.
It was pretty cool. Live call-in stuff is, it's unique, let me tell you.
Was that kind of like similar to Pastor's Perspective? Are you familiar?
Similar, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, similar, yeah. Very similar to that. But I mean, it was live. I mean, we had a 7-second delay in case somebody went off on us and they could, bleep it out real quick.
Right.
But it was fun. It was really cool. But anyway, he and I became really good friends. And I told him, I said, I wanted to be a minister at church. He said, you can't. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't? He's like, nah. He said, you can't. So we talked a few minutes. I said, so help me understand why you don't think I should be a minister. And he looked at me, stone cold, serious look. He said, how old was Jesus when he started his ministry? And I said, he was 30. He said, you're not even 30. and then he started laughing. He said, you know what? He said, I graduated from college. I was 21 years old. And he said, I was crucified by 2 different churches within 5 years because I knew all the answers. He said, and he was, at that time, he was probably pushing, he was probably 45 years old. Mm-hmm. So we're having this conversation. And he said, you know what? He said, now I don't even know the questions. And he said, I'm just telling you. He said, don't. He said, just don't. For your own sanity and for the church's sanity, don't go into ministry full-time until you're 30. So I'm like, okay, wow. That's cool. So I didn't. Okay. So I did the entrepreneurial thing. I left the college because we were expecting our first son, and I was traveling all the time. My wife didn't want me on the road 5 days a week taking care of a baby at home by herself.
Understandably
yeah.
so.
So I went into the insurance business. A friend of mine he was a board member at the college. He was a big hitter with New York Life in the state of Alabama. He got me a job with them. And so my first entry into the world of insurance sales, anything, was with New York Life. Worked with them for about 7 months, and I didn't bleed blue blood. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm not going to work with you because, I mean, you had to get permission to have a yard sale. I mean, that's crazy. Wow. They controlled your life that much. Straight in the day. I don't think they're that way today, but they were back in the 70s.
Just very like corporate minded as extreme, what we know it.
Back in the day, it was extreme, yeah. So anyway, I left, became an independent insurance agent, and I've been in and out of the insurance business ever since then. I did actually go into ministry when I turned 30. We had moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I'd sent a lot of kids to, there's a Christian school in Atlanta, in Norcross, Georgia, called Greater Atlanta Christian School. Sent a lot of kids over there, recruited a lot. When I was working for the college, I recruited a lot of kids from there, so I made many trips to that campus. And I told my wife, I said, when our kids get old enough to go to school, I want to move to Atlanta and put our kids in school there. So we moved to Atlanta. My wife and I, our kids were going into kindergarten and first grade the year that we moved to Atlanta. And I remember walking into that school with my wife, and we walked out of that school without enrolling our children because it was so expensive. And my wife was in tears. She's like, how are we ever going to do this? I'm like, I don't know, but we will. God always works out things, and it'll work.
That's right.
So she worked with the Gwinnett County School Systems. She was in the nutrition department. So both of our boys rode to school with Mom every day. I was working with a church in Alpharetta. It was about an hour drive for her to go down to the school in Gwinnett County. So they rode to school with her every day for 5 years. And then I was actually called on Labor Day weekend. I forget what year it was. Labor Day weekend, I was called by the president of the school, Greater Atlanta Christian School. He said, Ed, can you come help me? I'm like, why? He's like, well, the counselor that I had, who was supposed to do the college counseling to get kids, from high school to college, she just resigned. She and her husband are leaving the area. They're moving out. She said, I don't have anybody. He said, I know you know the college game. I'm like, yeah, I know it well. So I started working part-time for the school. Well, the perk in being a part-time employee is you get 50% off for your kids to go to school. So we ended up putting our kids in school there. They both graduated from Great Atlanta Christian.
So cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, irony of ironies, before we even left Montgomery, I had come out to California and visited Pepperdine University in Malibu. Came out for a conference they hold every spring. They hold a lectureship, Bible lectureship program for a week. I came out to it one time. And that was in like 1985, 84, 85. And I went back to Montgomery. I told my wife, I said, we really need to move to California. She's like, we are not taking our kids across the country from their grandparents. Her folks were near Savannah, Georgia. Mine were in Alabama. She's like, we're not doing that. I'm like, okay, I'll be patient. We moved to Atlanta, put my kids in Greater Atlanta Christian School. They're both getting to the point in their lives where they're starting to look at colleges. And I said, have you considered Pepperdine?
Yeah.
So,
Plant the seed.
yeah, you plant the seed. You know, the seed was planted in me in the early 80s when they were like 2 years old.
Yeah.
And so I brought them out here. And my youngest son actually was the first kid to come to Pepperdine. He started his freshman year. His brother had gone back to Harding, where my wife and I were alums. He thought that was a great school. Well, my youngest son, Thomas, he called his brother and said, you're an idiot for not being in Malibu, California. So after the first semester of Matt's sophomore year, he transferred out to Pepperdine. So both of my guys graduated from Pepperdine. And they came home in December of 2004. They came home for the Christmas holidays. And they told my wife and I, said, look, we're not coming back to Atlanta. We love California. We're staying in California, the West Coast. We love the weather. We love everything about it. We're not coming back. And I looked at my wife and I said, would you consider moving now? She's like, yeah, when can we go?
That's awesome.
So we came out.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle. You know, it only took me 20 years to get there, but full circle. So anyway, we came out in January of 2005, and I met with the church, small little church down in Dana Point, San Clemente area. Mm-hmm. They were meeting in a school. They wanted to go into their own facilities, and I had taken 2 churches in the Atlanta area from renting facilities to permanent facilities. And they wanted me to come and do the same thing out here. So we came out March of 2005, moved out, worked with a little church in San Clemente, took them from a school lunchroom cafeteria on Sundays to buying property and building a building. We didn't build it, but we remodeled the building that we bought down in San Clemente. The church is still there. They're doing great. So it's all good. Yeah.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. Great testimony right there.
God works.
God works. That's true.
He does.
Put your faith and trust in Him. And
absolutely.
Not only plant the seeds, though, right? It's important for us to continue to water them.
Yeah.
It sounds like you could have easily just let that seed die in the soil, right? And just let it be, and you could still be stuck in Atlanta right now. But
stuck would be the appropriate word, because the traffic in Atlanta is worse than LA.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Yeah, it's horrendous. Yeah.
Right. Well, your boys made the smart decision. They're like, Atlanta, Malibu.
Yeah, exactly. No doubt. They made good choices.
One. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I want to learn a little more about Memorial Funeral Services and what you guys are doing over there. You just recently had your grand opening. So
we haven't even had our grand opening yet. We haven't had a ribbon cutting or grand opening. The mortuary business is a little difficult to open, simply because the state wants to make sure you're ready to open when you do open, you know.
Right.
So for literally a year, I've been working on this project. Started looking for a building or property or real estate or something last September of 2021. Finally found a place in Hemet that would work. We literally rented an old Bank of Hemet building and converted it into a mortuary.
Awesome.
And so it took us 9 months to get the building remodeled and built out. And then once we were completely ready to be open, like I have the business license and I have the reseller's permit, all the occupancy permit, everything you need to have a business, you know, retail business.
Yep.
But I didn't have a license from the state of California, because they will not give you a license to operate as a mortuary until you have everything else in place. So they finally came out August 31st. September 2nd, I got an email from the state, said, congratulations, here's your license number. So now I have this wonderful 4-digit number, 2461, and that qualifies me to be opened as a mortuary. So we're still working on getting signage on the building, because I can't even put up a sign until I have a license. So we're working on that literally today. I got a phone call as I was walking in the door today about that. So
fantastic.
We'll probably have a big grand opening, ribbon cutting, and invite the world to come and see our building probably mid to late October.
Okay.
We'll be ready for all that, and we'll definitely invite you and the team to come out.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching, make sure to support.
Come see us.
So tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing over there. What's the mission behind your business?
Okay.
What vision do you have, and what are you looking to do in that community?
All right. I'll give you a little backstory on that if I can.
Yeah, please.
I was in full-time ministry, part-time insurance from really 1989 until 2009. I worked with 2 churches in Atlanta, 1 church in San Clemente. 2009 rolls around. I'm doing a study through the Old Testament with my church, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We get to the book of Numbers, chapter 8. There's a verse of scripture that says the priest should retire at the age of 50 from the work of the temple. He should allow younger men to do the work. And I'm like, well, if it was good enough for the priest, baby, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
So I
like
really,
that.
I really did.
Numbers
You
8.
know, this kind of hit me like a brick. I'm like, okay, if God wanted and I know why he wanted the priest to quit. Have you ever tried to sacrifice animals? I mean, have you ever done any hunting and had to clean big game? It's
Not
work.
big game,
It's
no.
work, brother. I mean, it's serious work.
Right.
And it takes a long time for a 55-year-old or year-old guy to clean a big animal. And you're talking oxen and, you know. So anyway, I decided, okay, if that's what God wanted them to do, I might as well do it too. Mm-hmm. So I decided to step away. I had a boat down in San Diego. We were living on it. And I was still selling insurance, life and health insurance, doing fine, but I was working alone. And I hated working alone.
Right.
So I told my wife, I'm going to find something to do. I don't know what, but I'll find something to do. So I see a blind ad on Craigslist. And if you don't know what a blind ad is, it's like there's no company name. There's just an opportunity, okay?
Right.
So it says, pre-need funeral salesperson needed, insurance license prefer, call 619, blah, blah, blah. So I call the number. I meet a gentleman by the name of Seth Menso, who was an outside sales manager for SCI, Dignity Memorial, largest owner-operator of cemeteries and funeral homes in the world. They had several locations in San Diego. They were looking for sales reps, so I go to work with him. And that started me on a career that I had no idea I would ever be involved with. Right. I mean, I talk to people about where you're going to go after you die for 20-something years from a pulpit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm preaching and, you know, working on helping people find Christ. And I never expected to be on the other side of that conversation with respect to getting someone prepared physically for what happens when you die. Mm-hmm. So I spent a couple hours with Seth, long conversation. I finally told him, I said, dude, I could do this in my sleep. And I literally could, because I was just so accustomed to and acclimated to that type of conversation. It was just a really easy thing for me to do.
Just came natural.
Yeah, very, very natural. Yeah. So I went to work with them. I worked with SCI for 7 years. I was a sales rep for them, literally 100% commission sales rep for them. Went into management, built a sales team with them, was invited to become a manager at Greenwood Cemetery. So I managed the family service advisors there for a couple of years. Then they extended an invitation for me to come to Houston. I was the facilitator and national director for their National Sales Manager Development Program in Houston for 3 years. I trained 65% of their sales managers in the field. I told Jerry Hurd, who was the vice president of sales, I told him, I said, I'm leaving. I said, I'm going back to California. He's like, why? He said, you're doing a great job here. I'm like, Jerry, I don't care how good a job I'm doing. I've trained way too many sales managers. If the numbers suck next year, you're going to kill me. So he's like, okay, go back to California. So we came back here, and I gotten rid of the boat in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Come back here. We got another boat. We're in Long Beach. And I worked with Westminster Cemetery for about a year and decided, you know what, SCI and I are really, really good friends, but I want to do something else. Mm-hmm. So I stepped aside, still selling funerals, still doing what I'm doing, and ended up taking a few years. I worked with a company based out of Salt Lake City as a regional manager for an insurance company. I traveled and visited funeral homes over the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, helping bring them into the world of prearranged funerals, just building sales teams for them. COVID shut down travel for everybody, shut down my job, really did, because of all the circumstances. So I sat for my funeral director's license in the state of California, secured the license, ended up working with England Family Mortuary in Temecula. Great company, good people. They do phenomenal service for the folks in the Temecula-Murrieta Valley. They really do. Yeah. Good friends of mine to this day. Even helped them open an office up in Sun City, a little satellite office for their company. That's awesome. And in the course of all of that, I told Josh, I said, I think I want to open my own funeral home. And I had a very good friend over in Irvine, Butch July, and I've known each other for years. Sold insurance together before when I first moved to California. We've been connected. Very dear friend. He kept talking to me about opening a funeral home. You should open your own place. And I'm like, nah, I'm not ready. All right. So Easter, a year ago, there's a song that came out, pretty new song. I think it's Elevation Church out of Charlotte, North Carolina, put out a song called Rattle. I don't know if you know the song or not. If you don't know it, when you edit this thing, you should put in a blurb of that and play the refrain, because it's an amazing song.
Let's get that.
But
maybe you could sing it for us.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
You wish.
The audience would prefer.
The audience would turn this thing off if I started to sing that song.
That's debatable.
No, we're not going to do that. But there's an expression in the song that says, open the grave, open the grave. I'm coming out. I'm going to live again. Mm. And that just hit me. I mean, cold chills went up and down my back when I heard that song. Because here's what's happening. My son and his wife in Culver City have just told us they're going to have a baby. So I got a grandbaby coming. Then I hear this song, "Open the Grave, I'm coming out, I'm going to live, I'm going to live again."
Mm.
Well, I didn't have a foot in the grave, but dude, I had it made. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm working part-time with England Mortuary.
Right.
I'm writing pre-need funerals, and I'm playing golf 2 or 3 times a week. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Living the great
I'm
life.
living the dream in California.
Yeah.
I'm living in paradise.
Absolutely.
So why in the world would I want to open a mortuary?
Mm.
Because it takes a lot of work
Yeah.
to open any business,
Yeah.
especially a business that really no one ever wants to talk about.
Well, one that's doing a lot of
Yes.
regulatory
Yeah.
work is
Yeah.
not an easy one at all.
Yeah. FTC loves us.
Yeah.
They like us a lot. Federal Trade Commission, they love us. So anyway, all of that came together, and I'm like, well, I have to do this. And, I don't mind telling you, I'm 63 years old in 2 weeks. And most people that are coming up on retirement years are coming up on retirement. They're planning retirement. Well, I
Yeah.
just launched a 10 to 15 year campaign,
Yeah.
and opening memorial funeral services, because our intent is not to just have one little funeral home in the city of Hemet, taking care of folks in Hemet.
Mm.
The intent is to have satellite branches of memorial funeral service, Hemet, Moreno Valley, Paris, Lake Elsinore, Wildemar. I promised Josh I wouldn't come to Temecula to the very end.
Yeah.
So if I ever open a location in Temecula, just know right up front it's the last one I'm going to do in the valley.
Last on the road.
Because I promised Josh I wouldn't interfere with his business.
That's awesome.
I mean, he's been
Look at
super
that.
supportive. And
That's
everything.
great integrity.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great for him too.
Yeah.
So anyway, he and I still talk quite often, and it's good. Or the relationship is very solid.
Cool.
But our intent was not to just do one little location. The intent was to do multiple locations. There's an element in the industry, in the funeral business especially, that I believe we can bring into that conversation that's remarkably different than what a lot of families experience in other places.
Right.
And there are 3 words that really have been pivotal in my conversations with individuals about what we do. And those words are caring, compassion, and understanding.
Caring, compassionate, and understanding.
Yeah, those are 3 key words about everything that we seek to do. It's not a transactional thing,
Right.
for me. It is a very deep, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, emotional conversation that you have with people.
Yeah.
I shared this with folks, and if you're listening to this and you ever decide to use Memorial Funeral Services, I'm not going to try to talk you into being a Christian, but I will tell you this. In the first 3 or 4 years that I worked in the funeral business, primarily in the field of selling pre-need funerals, I had more conversations with people about their faith than I'd had in the previous 5 years of ministry. And it's simply because when you're sitting and talking with someone about, this is your funeral,
Yeah.
it's a whole different level of intensity and
Right.
depth in that person's life that you get to.
Yeah. That's a lens most of us never even look through, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's so funny. When I was training sales managers with SCI, one of the practices that we taught was how to do door knocking, canvassing in neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
And I would teach, first of all, I'd teach the guys, look, you got to learn how to talk to the door. Because a lot of people have screen doors you can't see in, but they can see out, so they never open the screen door. But anyway, you would have, there were just things that you had to learn to be able to say. And one of the things that I used to teach people was, look, I know you don't want to have this conversation. I know you don't want to talk to me about this at all. This is not Thanksgiving dinner conversation. This is not, dinner conversation with the family on Tuesday night. But the reality is, if you don't have a 10 or 15-minute conversation with your family, then somebody's not going to wake up one day, and then you're stuck trying to figure out what do you need to do.
Yeah. We're stuck with the mess.
Yeah, I mean, this morning, literally before I came to your studio here, I had a conversation in the hallway with a gentleman that I just met today, and he said, "Hey, I want to ask you a question." And I'm like, "What's that?" He said, "Well, my grandmother passed a few weeks ago." He said she was 100 years old, still living alone. She passed. He said, "My mom couldn't bring herself to take care of the services, so I ended up having to do it all." And he asked me a couple of questions. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "I've come to the decision for myself and my family and my wife, we've got to make some plans ahead of time." And I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you did." I said, "Because about 85% of the people you ever see today or tomorrow or next week have never had a conversation."
Yeah.
And it's one of those conversations that I promise you're going to have.
Yeah.
Someone in your family is going to have the conversation either about you or with you about the fact that you're not going to wake up one day.
Yep.
Or they found you and you didn't wake up, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And making those plans ahead is so much better. But what we bring to that conversation when there has been a loss is a sense of caring and compassion that there are a lot of people in the industry, they don't have it.
Right.
And it's not because they don't want to. It's because for whatever reason, they've allowed themselves to become, calloused is not the right word, but they've had to subdue their emotions to the point that they don't allow themselves to connect.
Understand. I get that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that most people like subconsciously train themselves
Yeah.
to do
Right.
in the industry,
right.
not knowing, right?
Yeah.
But like having the empathy and being able to have those emotional connections and attachments and conversations, more importantly, sounds like that's what really separates you from some of your competitors.
I believe it will separate us.
Yeah.
I really do. And I've told people this before. If I ever get to the point in my life that a tear doesn't come to my eye, I do need to retire. and I need to get somebody else to do it, because and it's not that,
I love that.
My intent is not to make somebody cry every time they talk to me about funerals. That's not it. I have a lot of fun with it. I mean, I tell people all the time, look, I'll be the last guy to let you down or light you up.
Yeah.
Your choice, you know? So, I mean, I have fun with it because it's hard enough to talk about. I don't want to make it, demoralizing.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is important to realize that when that need arises and someone has passed, you need to have someone in your corner that understands a little bit about what you're going through, the challenges that you're going to be faced with dealing with maybe even family members who don't necessarily agree with the decisions that mom or dad wanted or someone else wanted, and having the depth of knowledge about the industry to be able to answer your questions in a way that are going to help you. Right. I mean, the guy I met this morning was literally asking me, he said, hey, Ed, I need to buy a marker for my grandmother. I'm like, great. He's like, what should I do? I said, just buy it from the cemetery. He's like, why? I'm like, because they guarantee it. I said, you and I could run right down to Paris right now. We could talk to the folks at Sun City Granite, and they do phenomenal work. They service most of the cemeteries in the valley. They provide the markers for the cemeteries. But his grandmother's buried at Rose Hill over in Los Angeles. And Sun City could send the marker over there. But if it's damaged, it's on him to get it repaired or replaced. If he buys it directly from them, they guarantee it for life. And if it's ever damaged or anything happens to it because of cutting the grass or, digging a graveside adjacent to it or something, the tractor damages, they'll replace it. Wow. That's their guarantee.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's worth a few $100. Yeah. To know that you never have to worry about it. And you don't get a phone call, oh, your grandmother's marker was busted because they dropped something on it or they ran over something and you got to come fix your thing. Right. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
So
essentially, it sounds like you kind of take them on that path of like, hey, these are the best options for you. Right. This is what it looks like, exactly. Right? You just kind of like paint that picture. Yeah. This is the path you're going to be going down.
Right.
Let's work through all of the rubbish right now.
Exactly.
Let's clear the brush so that when that time does come, you don't have family fighting, you don't have issues, you don't have to go through all the legal document and paperwork because you did a lot. You got your insurance in place, you had your will and your trust and all the other things that you need to have that you help them with. And most people probably don't even know any of this stuff when they come to you.
And I don't do wills or trust. I have attorneys that I refer people. I don't want to give someone. But it's important to understand all of the components that go into it.
Yeah.
And then be able to help them navigate through those waters that they've never been through, with an understanding of the consequences if you do or you don't, and the consequences of if you do this will happen. You can do that, but understand this is where it's going to take you. Right. And just having that information is valuable. Absolutely. There's not anything in the cemetery funeral business I haven't done, which is way cool for the families that I get to serve, because I understand a lot about what they're going to have to be dealing with whenever they have a death or they're planning for an imminent death. And to understand all of that and to have a working knowledge, because I literally have done that. I mean, I haven't literally sat on the tractor and dug the grave, but I've stood beside the guy that does it. So seeing those things and understanding those things with firsthand knowledge is invaluable. Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, look at Jesus. That's why we have such a great leader that we can follow, because. Right. He's been there. He's walked in those shoes, Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's what we all want, is we all want to work with professionals in their respected fields and industries. We want to have leaders in those areas guiding us down those paths, because at the end of the day, it's easy to just go up the street, grab, the mortuary right there. But like what...
And
What does that do for you?
A lot of people think it's about money.
Mm.
I mean, there are a lot of people that when death occurs, they think, well, let me get the cheapest thing. Yep. You don't want the cheapest thing.
Right.
You don't necessarily need to pay the highest price, but you don't necessarily want the cheapest thing either. I literally got a phone call in my office. I've been open 2 weeks. My phone number's been available. My literal phone number for the facility's been online for 2 weeks on my website. I mean, I can't even get it on the social media stuff that you guys are experts at getting at yet because I haven't been in business long enough.
We'll get you taken care of.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But this lady calls me up. She's like, hey, I'm trying to buy some service folders for my grandmother's funeral. I'm like, why are you calling me? and I ask it like this, why are you calling me? She's like, well, we had her cremated. We're going to have a service, private little ceremony. I just want to know where to get those. I'm like, generally, the funeral home that took care of your grandmother is the funeral home that's going to help provide those service folders. She said, oh, they don't do that. And she told me this particular company that they did this online thing. And it was very affordable. But they need more stuff.
Right.
And they need more assistance.
Yep.
And a full service mortuary funeral home like we are at Memorial Funeral Services can provide that. Mm-hmm. You don't want the cheapest thing. Because just like if you buy a car, you get what you pay for.
That's right. Every time.
You get what you pay for.
Always do.
And we're not the cheapest guy in town. We're not the most expensive in town. But I do guarantee you we provide the best service. And that's what really is important. At the end of the day, when everything is said and done, and you look back on the whole circumstance of what happened around that death when it occurred, you want to look at it and say, we didn't miss anything.
Yep.
We covered all the bases, and it was great, and it was a wonderful celebration.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I look at it as like now being a father of a 3-year-old, the last thing with plans of more to come. Yeah. The last thing I would ever want is to put my children in a situation where they have a mess to take care of when I had not all the time in the world, but I had plenty of time in this world to take care of it and make sure that burden wasn't cast on them, because it's not fair, right? Like that's one of those things that I look at, and we've all seen it where we lose a loved one or a friend or whatever it is, and we see the distraught in the family and the disruption and the fighting and all the bickering and everything that goes along with it, right? But if people just took more responsibility and they're a little more proactive in their lives, especially in this specific area, that could alleviate so much stress, so much anger, hate, fights, breakups of families. Exactly. I mean, it could really prohibit a lot of that.
Even if there aren't differing opinions within the family or challenges within the family, even if they all love each other and they're getting through it great together, it still takes time to settle an estate. It still takes time to transfer property and real property, and all that. And those are a part of that equation that people don't realize and they don't think about. And it isn't that hard to get all that stuff in place and to get it taken care of. Right. It really is pretty simple. You just have to be proactive in doing it. Mm-hmm. I met with a gentleman yesterday. He's a traditional life insurance guy, and we were talking, and I asked him, I said, how many times have you helped a family pick out a casket or urn for the funeral? And he started laughing. He said, man, I don't do that stuff. I said, exactly. You don't do that. That's not your job. That's my job. I said, so if you and I were able to partner together, we can complete the transaction. Mm-hmm. And you know, you've given them an opportunity to have all the money that they need to take care of all the financial requirements at the time of anyone's death. But if they don't know what to do with that money, all they have is a bunch of money, and they don't know what to do with it. It's almost like someone who wins the lottery. They don't know what to do with $37 million. Yep. And if someone isn't there to help guide them on what to do with that $37 million, in about 6 months they will be bankrupt, and we'll have no idea where the money went.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to have this perspective, because like we were talking about earlier, we don't talk about this stuff every day, you know? We're not talking about death. We're not talking about what happens when I'm gone, you know? And and what does that look like? But we all, or most of us, have experienced what that looks like from a third person point of view, right?
I mean, we just saw the Queen of England.
Yeah.
She didn't live forever.
Yeah. Prime example right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously, she had her affairs in order.
You would hope.
Yeah, you would hope, right?
You would hope.
Assuming she has the best accountants, financial advisors, attorneys, all in between. But it could still get messy, nonetheless.
That's exactly right.
So at the end of the day, it's all about having the right team
Yes.
that kind of
That's
holds your
exactly
hand,
right.
walks you through it,
Yep.
and supports you and your family, because this is the hardest thing that any of us will ever go through in life.
It can be.
And
But it can be made so much easier.
yeah,
And that's,
yeah,
that's been my message for nearly 15 years. It can be so much easier.
Mhm.
It's never going to be fun. There is never a good day to go to a funeral,
Right.
period. End of discussion. There's never a good day to have a funeral, especially if it's yours.
yeah,
But there is a better way to approach that day.
hmm
And that's with things in order, plans in place, so that the day after the funeral, the family is not scrambling, wondering, what in the world are we going to do now?
that's right.
Because there's a game plan in place. There's a very strategic map that's been then drawn out so that they know step by step where to go, what to do, and how to do it.
Mhm.
And with the proper help and care, it is so much easier. Without that, I mean, I had a phone call last week from a gal that I'd taken care of her mother who passed over a year ago. She needs a letter to take to probate court.
Mhm.
That is not a good place to be 14 months after your mother has passed in probate court, because that's just cost you tens of thousands of dollars in the state of California.
And you don't even have to be there at all if
And
you do
you
things
don't.
right.
No, you don't. You don't. So, I mean, those are the things that I try to help people understand and guide them
Right.
to the right folks to get some things taken care of, so that when it's all said and done and I do my aftercare visit, I'm having coffee and a piece of cake, and it's a very pleasant conversation.
That's awesome. So it sounds like inside your empire, there's three key words.
Yep.
Caring,
Yep. Compassionate.
compassion, and understanding.
Yep.
Right. And how does that drive you every day of your life? Like when you wake up and get out of bed and you go and you start having those conversations, how do those three key words, trigger words, buzzwords in your life, how are they a driving factor in your life?
Okay. Years ago, when I was in ministry, I was studying again from the Old Testament. I never preached from it very much, but I studied it.
Yeah.
And I ran across this story that almost everyone is familiar with if they know anything about the Bible at all. It's the story of the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing story. Supposedly that's where God confounds the languages, and we get all these great languages that have, whatever. And that's the front part of the story, but there's a backside to that story. Because there's a verse of scripture, I can't quote it exactly, but there's a statement that God makes as he's looking down from heaven at the tower that these people that he's created are building. He looks at them and he makes this statement. When they speak with one voice, nothing they plan will be impossible for them. That is a very, very amazing statement coming from God. When they speak with one voice, nothing they plan will be impossible for them.
Wow.
So it has become super important in my life, and this has been a journey for all my adult life to work through this, and I'm not there yet. I probably won't be there until I cross over and the good Lord gives me that perfect body, mind, and soul. But I work constantly on three things. What I say, what I do, and what I think have to be the same. When there's congruency in that, and I have a plan in place, nothing is impossible.
That's right.
Nothing is impossible. But you have to speak with clarity.
Right.
You have to speak with one voice.
Yep.
You can't think one thing and then go do something else. You can't think one thing and say something else. You have to be extremely careful about what you say. Because I promise you, what you say, you will get.
Yeah.
You will
Agreed.
get it.
I agree with that.
What you say, you will get.
Yep.
It may not happen immediately, but say it enough and you'll get it.
You'll get it. Words are so powerful.
Yes.
Very underrated.
Yes.
I mean, God spoke this world into existence. That alone tells you how powerful our words are,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's it.
That is probably one of the most under conversated topics, I think,
Yeah.
too, especially in the church,
Yeah.
that they don't talk about. You know, like the negativity that you're speaking out into this world affects us.
And listening to.
And yeah.
I mean, I don't listen to the radio for a reason. I don't even listen to much Christian radio for a reason, because what they say in between songs drives me nuts sometimes. I don't get into that kind of stuff. And so what we listen to is hugely important. I heard a gentleman speak. It was a seminar that I went to probably 35, 40 years ago. He made this statement. He said, you're going to be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of three things. what you hear, what you read, and the people with whom you associate.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's important that we associate with the right people, if it's important that we listen and read the right thing to become a different person in 5 years than we are today, it's also important that the words that we say make a difference. And when we get our world in alignment, and what we say, what we do, and what we're thinking are all the same thing, powerful things happen.
That's right.
When they speak with one voice, nothing they plan will be impossible for them. That's powerful.
That is powerful. And especially like when you look at it internally, if we want to internalize that now, and because we have internal dialogue and we have our external dialogue, right?
All the time.
And our internal dialogue, and again, something we don't talk enough about, internal dialogue, sometimes we get thoughts that aren't our thoughts, right?
That's right. You bet.
And so if you're not able to decipher which thoughts are yours and which ones aren't, and separate the two,
Right.
you're going to be in a mixed confusion of all these crazy emotions and all these thoughts going on, and you're going to get thrown off to the side. You'll get tossed and turned like the waves, right?
Yeah, sure will.
So it's really important to, like you said, have all of those key areas aligned and just be directly aligned with God.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, I mean, you're just going to live a life of confusion.
I mean, think back, the story I shared with you at the very beginning. The spring of 85, I came to California.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about and planning, not necessarily planning every day, but it was an intention of mine that I want to live in California.
Yep.
2005, I show up. March 26th, drive into Dana Point, California with a U-Haul truck and a car in tow.
Just praising the Lord all the way, right?
Yeah. So
made it happen.
You know, you get what you say.
Yeah.
You get what
100%.
you say, and so that's why it's important to plan what you're going to say. Think about it. You know, I learned in a sales training that I did. Matter of fact, it was probably with New York Life, my first sales training gig that I ever had in my life. Before you say anything in response to the person with whom you're sitting and talking, especially in a sales conversation, just take that 3-second pregnant pause. Think about what you're going to say, and allow the person with whom you're speaking to think about what they just said, because they're expecting you to say something. And if you'll take that moment of pause, what you say and offer will have greater value.
Yeah.
And it's magical.
I agree with that 100%. And sometimes it's the awkward silence that makes us not want to pause,
Sure.
right? Because nobody likes the awkward silences. But when you're able to gather your thoughts and realign so that you're not going to say something that either you don't mean or it's taken wrong, or it's just not organized in your thought to be able to come out properly.
Exactly.
You can put yourself in really sticky situations, especially if you're in sales, you know.
That's right.
So that's a very great tip. I appreciate
In any
that.
situation. I mean, marriages, just think the last fight that you had with your spouse, if you had shut your mouth for 3 seconds, how better would that conversation have ended? You know?
Every
time.
time. Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. I want to ask you 2 things. Number 1, what is your biggest tip for a new entrepreneur or business owner? What's your best advice to them?
Okay. Do your due diligence before you launch anything. I mean, it is. You know, this has been a year-long project that Butch and I have been on.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had a great contractor. General contractor was phenomenal guy. He's done a good job on the building, but it took longer than we expected. Was that his fault? Maybe. Was it the city's fault? Maybe. Was it my fault? Maybe. Yes to all 3.
Right.
So do your due diligence before you begin. You know, I did enormous amounts of research before we launched this project to make sure that the numbers would work, that the cash flow would work, that we could cash flow the business. So you have to do your due diligence before you just launch out.
Great.
You know, I don't remember the statistics, but you know, the Chamber of Commerce years ago used to say that, you know, like 80% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years or first 2 years or whatever it is, and you know, the remaining balance will be out, and at the end of the day, there are very few businesses still standing.
Right.
And a lot of that, I think, is really because they were undercapitalized and they didn't do their due diligence before they launched out.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest thing that I would offer to anyone that's looking at starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I agree.
You know, I've had many friends who've gone into real estate anticipating it to be a full-time career, and it ended up not being a full-time career.
Mm-hmm.
For the simple reason that it takes a long time to find someone who trusts you enough to sell their home.
Yeah.
And it takes you sometimes even longer to find someone who trusts you enough to sell them a home.
Right.
You know, and so you have to have reserves,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes money in the bank to make that success, to allow that to be successful.
Yeah.
So capital is important, and due diligence is right there. You gotta
Due
have both of
diligence,
those.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can't agree with that more. I mean, I've met with way too many business owners that don't have business plans.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you don't have a business plan, you didn't do your due diligence because you didn't do any of the foundational work that
Yeah.
it takes to start a business, right?
Yeah.
You didn't know market research. You don't have any data and analytics to run off, no competitor analysis.
Right.
You don't know what your budget is
Right.
going to be, if
Right.
you're going to even be able to cash flow this thing for more than 6 months,
Right.
right? All those
Exactly.
things. So
Right.
that's a really great tip. Do your due diligence. All right. Last thing, where can we find you and how can we best support you?
The physical location, Memorial Funeral Services in Hemet, 1111 South State Street in Hemet. It's near the corner of South State and Stetson.
And you said it was the old East,
It's the old Hemet Bank building.
old Hemet Bank
Yeah,
building.
Hemet Bank building. For those of you who've been around Hemet for any period of years, I think that was one of their first branches that they ever built.
Okay.
It's across from the old Kmart building, if you've been there long enough to know Kmart.
Mm.
And if you don't know anything else, you probably know where the new McDonald's is
Yeah.
in Hemet. We're literally across the street from McDonald's.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's where we're at. Website, memorialfuneralservices.com. You can reach me. My email address is ed @memorialfuneralservices.com. Call me on my cell phone, 619-942-1994. The office number, 951-357-2315. However you want. Best way is just come by.
Come by.
Stop by there. I'm not there right now,
Uh,
but I'll be back there this afternoon. And come by. I have a Keurig coffee machine in the foyer, a little coffee station set up, so we can always have a coffee and a conversation.
Cool. Well, Ed, we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Love hearing your story.
Thanks.
The insight that we got from your upbringing, your successes and failures, the seeds you planted, continued to water, the faith that you've had to continue to put your trust in God,
Yeah.
the relationships that you've built and continued to nurture, the organization, the structure, the community.
Right.
Like the community involvement, and we didn't even really talk much about that, but
Yeah,
your
that's
community
huge.
involvement is incredible.
Yeah.
Your presence, not just in Temecula, your presence from here all the way up through Sun City, Menifee, like you have a great presence, a really good reputation, and so we really appreciate you coming out
My
here.
pleasure. Thank
Excited to support you in the upcoming grand opening and ribbon cutting.
We'll let you know.
And yeah, so hey guys, if you don't currently have your ducks in a row, if you haven't planned or strategized for your future, whether you're a parent or whether you're a grandparent, or even if you're not a parent yet, it doesn't matter. You can never plan too soon. So reach out to Ed. This guy is one of the most compassionate and genuine men I know, and he is a wealth of knowledge. He's a great conversation, and it is definitely worth your time to sit down with him. So, Ed,
Thank you.
we appreciate you.
Thank you very much.